You know that feeling when just one small detail completely changes how you see the big picture?
Yeah, like a perspective shift.
Exactly. Well, today we're doing a deep dive into something that might seem small, but is actually hugely strategic. Your knees.
Often overlooked,
Yeah,
but so critical.
totally. We've got some really fascinating sources here looking at how the precise placement of your knees affects, well, pretty much everything from just walking around day to day.
For really specialized stuff like Stott Pilates.
Right. And our mission today is to kind of unpack why knee alignment isn't just about, how things look.
It's way more than aesthetics.
It's fundamental, a critical pillar for performance, preventing injuries, and really your overall body health.
Absolutely.
So whether you're an athlete listening in, or maybe someone managing joint pain, or maybe you're just curious about how your body works.
Which is fascinating in itself.
It really is. Understanding the subtle science behind knee position could genuinely, well, revolutionize how you move and feel. Get ready for maybe a few aha moments.
Hope so.
Okay, let's start by challenging that common idea. We tend to think of knees as just simple hinges, right? Bend, straighten, that's it.
That's the usual picture, yeah.
Yeah.
But the sources we looked at paint a much richer picture. The knee is really this central complex joint.
A crucial intersection, they call it, in the body's kinetic chain.
Exactly. And it's doing so much more than just bending and straightening. I mean, think about the forces it manages.
Right. It's not just simple movement.
No, it's dealing with multidirectional forces all at the same time. You've got compression, just your body weight pressing down,
Okay.
shearing forces, where surfaces slide against each other, and torsion, like twisting forces.
Wow. All at once.
All at once. Plus, there are these really intricate gliding and rolling motions happening inside the joint, especially once you bend past about, say, 30 degrees.
What happens then?
Well, that's when your kneecap, the patella, actually slides down this specific groove in your thigh bone. It's constantly adjusting to keep things congruent.
Congruent, meaning?
Meaning keeping the surfaces fitting together just right, like perfectly matched parts.
Okay, so it's incredibly complex, managing all these forces and movements. What happens if that delicate balance is off? Why should we care so much about this complexity in our daily lives?
Oh, it matters hugely because as the sources really stress, if your knee placement is poor or if it just can't handle those stresses effectively,
Yeah.
it can set off this whole cascade of biomechanical imbalances. And it's not just at the knee.
It affects other parts too.
Definitely. It ripples right through your body. Think of the knee as this central pivot. If that pivot isn't stable, everything above and below has to kind of compensate.
Right, leading to stress and maybe problems elsewhere.
Exactly that. It's why knee health is so linked to hip and even ankle and back health.
So less like a simple door hinge and more like a really sophisticated joint in a robotic arm or something.
That's a great analogy. It has to handle downward pressure, sideways forces when you turn, twisting from the hip or foot. If one part isn't pulling its weight, the knee often takes the hit.
And that congruence, you mentioned that perfect fit, if that's off.
If that fit is even slightly off, you get increased friction, uneven stress. And that can lead to pain, wear and tear, that kind of thing.
Okay, got it. So knees are complex marvels, not simple hinges. But how do we actually, understand and maybe correct their positioning for better health?
Well, our sources point to two really powerful lenses, two different but complementary approaches. First, there's Stott Pilates.
Right. The modern evolution of Joseph Pilates' work.
Exactly. It's very contemporary, very holistic, designed specifically with rehabilitation, performance enhancement, and injury prevention in mind.
And it's built on a really solid foundation of anatomy, biomechanics.
And physiology, yeah. Deep knowledge there. And central to Stott Pilates are these core principles.
Let's break those down. What are they?
Okay, so first, there's achieving pelvic neutrality. That's finding this stable, balanced position for your pelvis. It's the foundation.
The base for everything else.
Pretty much. Then, deep core engagement. Activating muscles like the transverse abdominis, the sort of internal corset muscle, and the pelvic floor. Creates this strong internal support. Then there's controlled diaphragmatic breathing.
How does breathing fit in?
It's key for optimizing that abdominal stability. Plus, maintaining vertebral neutrality, keeping the spine aligned to avoid muscular compensations and joint stress.
Okay.
And finally, muscular centering. That's the coordinated activation of all those stabilizing muscles, especially around the knee. We're talking quadriceps, hamstrings,
Yeah.
making sure they work together to keep the joint tracking properly.
And it's not just about holding poses, right? I think that's a common misunderstanding.
Absolutely not. Stott Pilates uses dynamic postural analysis. They look at your knee position and how well you control it while you're moving.
Ah, so it's active.
Very active.
Ah.
And that active control becomes a really major indicator of how effective your overall practice is.
But, understanding that complexity is one thing, diagnosing the really subtle imbalances, that feels like another challenge altogether.
It is. And that's where the insights of someone like Florence Kendall become incredibly valuable.
Ah, the physical therapy pioneer.
Exactly. Florence Kendall, renowned American physical therapist, her work, especially her 1952 book, Muscles, Testing, and Function with Posture and Pain, just revolutionized postural evaluation.
How so? What did she do differently?
She brought this clinical eye for detail that went way beyond just looking at someone standing still. Her method involves meticulously examining the whole muscular system.
Not just the muscles acting, but
The agonists, the antagonists, the synergists, all the muscle chains working together, or maybe not working together properly. She focused on the quality of their balance to find the dysfunctions that lead to pain or other issues.
that sounds incredibly precise. Can you give us a specific example? How would Kendall's method pinpoint a knee problem?
Sure. Let's take patellar maltracking. It's a common cause of that nagging pain at the front of the knee. Kendall's protocol uses a combination of careful observation, manual muscle testing MMT, and watching how you move functionally. Through this, she could often identify that the maltracking stems from a specific imbalance.
Like what?
Often, it's a weaker vastus medialis, that's one of the inner quad muscles, compared to an overactive vastus lateralis on the outside.
Ah, so one muscle is weaker, the other is too strong, and it pulls the kneecap off course.
Exactly. It pulls the kneecap slightly outwards in its groove, causing irritation and pain. It's that granular level of detail about muscle function.
That really highlights understanding the mechanics. Did Kendall focus only on muscle strength imbalances?
No, not at all. Her work also put a huge emphasis on kinesthetic and proprioceptive awareness.
Right, that's the body's sense of its own position and movement.
Precisely. Your ability to know where your limbs are in space without looking. It's about how your body instinctively adapts its posture to gravity and mechanical stress, making tiny adjustments constantly.
You really get a sense from the sources of this powerful synergy between Kendall's clinical insights and Stott Pilates.
Absolutely. Kendall's diagnostic rigor really enriches the Stott Pilates practice. Her focus on joint neutrality, on muscle synergy. It resonates perfectly with the Stott goal of optimal alignment for efficient, lasting movement.
It sounds like having a really detailed diagnostic map before you even start the exercises.
That's a great way to put it. Imagine using Kendall's tests before starting Pilates to identify specific knee weaknesses or imbalances.
Okay.
That information then allows you to customize the Stott Pilates program, whether you're doing mat work or using the reformer, the Cadillac, chair, or barrels.
So for someone listening, how would they actually feel the difference? Say they walk into a Stott session. How does adding Kendall's lens make it better than just a standard class?
Okay, good question. So imagine someone comes in with that anterior knee pain we talked about. Without Kendall's approach, the instructor might just give general quad strengthening exercises.
Which might not help or could even make it worse.
Potentially. But with Kendall's diagnostic insight, maybe we pinpoint that weak vastus medialis causing the patellar maltracking.
Right.
So the Stott program immediately becomes super targeted. We select exercises specifically to activate that muscle in the right way, maybe using the reformer for controlled resistance. It turns a generic workout into a precise, almost therapeutic intervention.
That's the hyper-accurate tool you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. It refines every single movement choice.
That sounds incredibly effective. But what's maybe the biggest challenge in actually blending these two? Making sure Kendall's detailed diagnosis properly informs the Pilates session.
I'd say the biggest hurdle is probably the level of expertise needed from the instructor or therapist. It demands a really deep understanding of both Kendall's assessment and the Stott Pilates repertoire.
It's not just ticking boxes.
No, definitely not. It requires the ability to truly individualize the program, to see the connections, and adapt exercises on the fly based on what you observe, not just applying a standard sequence.
But when it is done well,
Oh, it's profound. It's a true integration, using clinical knowledge to enhance a contemporary movement practice. It gets you beyond just thinking about aesthetics into a really fine understanding of joint biomechanics. It makes the whole process safer and far more effective in the long run.
Okay, so with all this talk about complexity and diagnosis, it really leads to the question, what actually is ideal knee alignment? What are we aiming for when we talk about a neutral posture?
Right. Optimal knee alignment in neutral posture is, well, it's a foundational concept. Essentially, it means your thigh bone, the femur, your shin bone, the tibia, and your kneecap, the patella, are all lined up in precise angular relationships
And why is that precision so important?
because it ensures that mechanical stress is distributed evenly across the joint surfaces. And it allows your muscles to activate efficiently without those imbalances we keep mentioning.
Can you give us a visual cue? Like, how could someone picture that ideal alignment?
Yeah, definitely. Imagine drawing an invisible plumb line down the side of your body. Ideally, it would pass through a few key landmarks. It starts at the greater trochanter, that bony bump on the outside of your hip. Then it should pass right through the lateral femoral epicondyle, that's the outer bump on your knee.
Got it.
And finally, down to the lateral malleolus, the prominent bone on the outside of your ankle. In optimal neutral posture, those 3 points line up. No visible deviation inwards or outwards.
Like a perfectly straight line connecting hip, knee, and ankle from the side.
Exactly. Represents a really balanced and mechanically efficient pathway for forces.
Maintaining that straight line sounds like it needs some serious muscle coordination. Which muscles are the key players here?
It absolutely requires harmonious synergy. We're talking about balanced action between the vastus medialis and lateralis, those inner and outer quad muscles again, plus your hamstrings at the back of the thigh, and really crucial hip muscles, especially the gluteus medius on the side of your hip.
And if there's a weakness or imbalance there?
Well, a deficit in strength, or even just delayed activation of one of these muscles, can lead to problems. A common one is the knee collapsing inward, what biomechanics folks call dynamic valguses.
Dynamic valgus, like when you land from a jump and your knee buckles in slightly?
Exactly that. Instead of staying aligned over the foot, it drifts inwards. That inward collapse is dynamic valgus, and it's often a major red flag, a precursor to issues in Pilates, running, you name it.
So it's not just about strength then. The sources also really stress the importance of proprioception, that sensory motor control.
Oh, absolutely vital. You described it well earlier, the body's internal GPS for movement.
Right.
Proprioception is what allows your knee joint to constantly sense its position and make tiny adjustments to maintain that perfect alignment. It helps you adapt to changing forces, especially when things are unstable.
Like on some of the Pilates equipment.
Precisely. Or even just walking on uneven ground. It's that ability to know where your knee is and control it without having to consciously think about it every second.
Which raises another question. How independent is the knee? Does its alignment depend only on the muscles right around it?
Not at all. The knee is definitely not an island. Its alignment is critically interdependent with what's happening at your hip above and your ankle and foot below.
A real chain reaction.
Totally. Even a seemingly small issue like moderate asymmetry at the ankle, maybe one foot flattens more than the other, or an uncorrected rotation at the hip, that can directly disrupt your neutral knee posture. And that forces compensations elsewhere, creating that domino effect up and down the kinetic chain. Everything's connected.
Okay, let's bring this into the studio then, putting theory into practice. The sources really emphasize that where you place your knees during Stott Pilates exercises is strategically vital.
Absolutely. It's not arbitrary. That precise positioning directly influences the joint dynamics, how muscle forces get distributed, and that neuromuscular control we just talked about, all crucial for safety and performance.
Let's start with the foundations, mat work and the reformer. How do they help build that knee control?
Okay, mat work is great because it's performed on a stable surface. This lets you really focus on building that fundamental body awareness boost.
Getting the basics right.
Exactly. Recruiting those deep stabilizing muscles, improving the coordination between your nerves and muscles, all without putting excessive stress on the joints. It's ideal for starting to correct deviations, like that valgus collapse or a varus, bow-legged alignment.
How does it do that?
By engaging muscles like the gluteus medius, for example, which helps control the thigh bone and limit that inward rotation that often contributes to knee valgus.
And then the reformer builds on that. It introduces springs for resistance or assistance.
Right. The reformer is fantastic because it allows for really precise, progressive control over the load on the knee. The springs give you either help or challenge.
And that influences the knee's movement?
Directly. It influences the knee's kinematics, its path of motion. You can use it to limit unwanted rotations or excessive adduction moving inward or abduction moving outward.
So for someone using it, what's the benefit?
It means you can effectively strengthen those key stabilizing muscles around the knee while simultaneously protecting the ligaments from strain. Plus, the moving carriage really amplifies proprioceptive feedback.
Ah, so you get a better feel for where your knee is.
Exactly, a heightened sense of its position and movement, which really helps refine your motor control and precision.
Okay, moving on to some of the perhaps more advanced equipment, the Cadillac and the chair. They seem to offer specific challenges for control and function. What's the Cadillac's role?
The Cadillac is quite versatile, with its steel frame, bars, straps, springs. It allows for very precise isolation of specific knee movements.
Like just flexion and extension.
Exactly, or just abduction and adduction, while keeping the segments above and below the hip and ankle stabilized. This helps you really fine-tune the control of the joint's trajectory.
And you can adjust the resistance.
Precisely. You can adjust alignment under carefully modulated resistance, which is crucial for avoiding excessive stress on ligaments or the meniscus or those cartilage pads in the knee.
And then there's the chair. That looks like it really challenges stability.
Oh, it does. The chair is brilliant for challenging your stabilizing muscles and those opposing muscle chains in more dynamic situations.
Like standing or moving between positions.
Yes, standing work, semi-seated positions, transitions. The adjustable spring tension and the seat configuration mean you can work on controlling your knee in really functional ways, mimicking things you do in daily life or sports.
It almost sounds like it deliberately creates instability.
In a controlled way, yes. It creates controlled imbalances that force your body to adapt, guiding that proprioceptive reorganization we talked about. It helps you find stability even when things are unstable.
So both the Cadillac and chair are really pushing that neuromuscular adaptation.
Definitely. They're fantastic for reinforcing neuromuscular plasticity, the nervous system's ability to learn and adapt, and helping you maintain that ideal femorotibial axis, that bi-shin alignment, even under significant load.
Lastly, the barrel. It has that distinctive curved shape. What's its specific role for the knees?
The barrel is primarily designed for safely managing extension and flexion, straightening and bending. That convex curve provides three-dimensional support.
Making it safer.
Much safer, especially for controlling the end ranges of motion. It helps prevent hyperextension or excessive mobilization while still facilitating precise muscle activation around the knee. It supports the knee through its natural arc.
And you mentioned its natural inclination respects the knee's physiological path.
Yes, the shape encourages the knee to move along its natural intended path. This is really important because it reduces stress on crucial structures like the ACL, PCL, and the meniscal cartilage.
So particularly good for prevention or rehab.
Absolutely vital for both,
Yeah.
especially if someone has existing degenerative changes like arthritis. It guides the movement safely.
And looking bigger picture, how does barrel work tie into the core Stott principles?
Well, exercises on the barrel always integrate that controlled breathing and deep core engagement, activating the transverse abdominis, the multifidus muscles in the back to ensure pelvic stability.
So it's reinforcing those whole body kinetic chain connections.
Exactly. And because you feel more supported, your proprioception often improves. You become better at detecting and correcting even subtle knee deviations yourself, reducing those unhelpful compensations.
Okay, so we've gone through the theory, the diagnostics, the equipment. Let's talk bottom line. What's the real-world payoff for you, the listener, in adopting this knee-centric approach, blending Kendall's insights with Stott Pilates?
Well, the payoff is pretty significant. Ultimately, this approach directly optimizes your motor performance, how well you move, and significantly cuts down your injury risk.
It's not just about looking good in the pose.
Not at all. It's about building robust, efficient biomechanical mechanisms that support lasting health and well-being. Optimal knee stabilization acts as a solid pivot point for so many movements.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about doing leg extensions on the reformer.
Yeah.
If you maintain perfectly aligned knees throughout, you're not just strengthening generically, you're increasing strength in very specific muscles while reducing unwanted joint movements or stress. This leads to greater fluidity, more precision in your movements, and actually better energy efficiency because you're not wasting effort compensating.
And on the flip side, injury prevention, which is huge for knees. They seem so vulnerable.
They are, often due to poor alignment or that deficient neuromuscular control. That's why this kind of deep dive analysis is so valuable.
Because it spots problems early.
Exactly. It allows for early identification of potential overload factors, things like excessive internal rotation of the femur, that dynamic valgus we keep mentioning, or maybe overload on one side of the knee joint, the lateral compartment.
And correcting
This
the...
means you redistribute the stresses more evenly. You prevent those repetitive microtraumas that, over time, can lead to painful conditions like patellar tendinopathies or other overuse injuries.
And it's important even if you already have some knee issues.
Absolutely critical for what we call secondary prevention.
Hmm.
If you already have some knee fragility, this approach helps you manage it, maintain function, and prevent things from getting worse.
There also seems to be a strong body-mind connection emerging here. How does this focus impact our overall awareness?
That's a great point. The synchronization you develop between your deep core control and that peripheral knee stability, it really enhances your proprioception and your overall neuromotor regulation.
So you become more aware, more stable.
Yes. When you combine that refined core and pelvic placement with stable knees, you create this incredibly harmonious kinetic chain. It actually reduces postural sway. You're literally more stable on your feet.
And that boosts body awareness.
Massively. It fosters this ability for real-time self-correction. You start to automatically sense and adjust, and you get better at anticipating how your body needs to respond to different loads or movements during dynamic exercise. It's empowering, really.
Which ultimately leads back to that idea of personalized progress. It's not one size fits all.
Precisely. This whole approach fundamentally advocates for fine individualization. How you progress, the intensity you work at, the specific exercises chosen.
It all depends on the individual.
It has to. It should be modulated based on your unique body structure, your morphology, the current state of your joints, your controlled range of motion, and your specific neuromuscular capabilities. It's this rigorous, systemic analysis that ensures the training is truly beneficial.
What does that guarantee?
It guarantees, as much as possible, both the functional longevity of your knees, keeping them healthy for the long haul, and the full expression of your body's movement potential.
Wow. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it really feels like the knee, which is so easy to just take for granted, is
Yeah.
truly a crossroads, a critical junction for both performance and prevention. And getting that positioning right, it's not just nice to have.
No, it's the sine qua non, as the sources put it, the absolutely essential condition for optimal, safe, and durable function, not just in the knee, but throughout the body.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Next time you move, walking, climbing stairs, exercising, maybe pause and consider not just what your knee is doing.
But how it's doing it. How is it connected to your hip, your foot, your core? How might bringing a bit more awareness to that vital joint change things for you?
Yeah, how could that deeper awareness transform your daily activities, maybe even your long-term physical health? It's quite something to think about.
It really is. And the exploration doesn't stop here. The sources suggest research is ongoing.
Looking into what?
Things like even more personalized programs, potentially using advanced imaging or even wearable technology to give real-time feedback on alignment during movement.
That sounds fascinating.
Shows a real commitment to scientific rigor and clinical adaptation, ensuring that methods like Stott Pilates continue evolving as powerful tools for supporting our musculoskeletal health long-term.